The massive space station hung in the void like a steel flower. Its 12 arms stretched out from the center, each one representing a different alien race in the Galactic Council. Inside the main chamber, thousands of beings from across the galaxy had gathered for one purpose. They were here to judge humanity. Admiral Sarah Chen sat alone at the defendant's table. Her gray hair was pulled back in a simple knot, and her blue uniform bore the simple Earth symbol on the shoulder. Around her, the chamber buzzed with alien voices speaking in dozens of languages. Some made clicking sounds, others hummed in frequencies that hurt human ears, and a few communicated through flashing lights. At the center of the chamber stood Ambassador Zethkri. His tall, thin body was covered in dark scales that shifted color when he moved. His species, the hegemony, had ruled the galaxy for over 2,000 years. They were old, powerful, and they did not like surprises. Fellow council members, Zethkri's voice echoed through the chamber. We gather today to address a serious crime. The human species has broken the most sacred law of our galaxy. A hologram appeared above the chamber floor. It showed images of space stations, laboratories, and strange-looking ships. The pictures were grainy, but clear enough to see what they contained. For the past 50 years, humans have been secretly working with dark matter, Zethkri continued. They have built weapons. They have created ships. They have violated the astral accords that every civilized species has signed. Murmurs spread through the chamber. The crystalline beings called the Vorth made sounds like breaking glass when they were upset. The energy creatures known as the Luminari flickered with angry red light. Even the hive-minded Krex buzzed with a single voice of disapproval. Admiral Chen watched it all with calm eyes. She had expected this day for years. Humanity had always been different from the other species in the galaxy. While aliens perfected old technologies, humans kept asking, what if? And why not? It made the council nervous. The evidence is clear, Zethkri said, pointing at the hologram. These humans have built dark matter research facilities in 12 different star systems. They have created ships that our sensors cannot detect. They have weaponized the very fabric of space itself. The crowd grew louder. Some aliens called for immediate action. Others demanded that Earth be cut off from the rest of the galaxy. A few even suggested that humanity should be sent back to their home planet and forbidden from ever leaving again. Council leader Vexthor raised his 6 arms for silence. His species, the ancient Archons, had been around longer than any other race. When he spoke, everyone listened. These are serious charges, Vexthor said. His voice was deep and seemed to come from everywhere at once. Dark matter research has been forbidden for good reason. The last species to attempt it destroyed their entire solar system. Admiral Chen finally stood up. The chamber fell silent as all eyes turned to her. She was small compared to most of the aliens around her, but she carried herself with quiet confidence. May I speak? She asked. Zethkri's scales shifted to an angry purple color. You will have your chance to defend your species before we pass judgment. I'm not here to defend anything, Chen said calmly. I'm here to correct your understanding of the situation. This caused another wave of murmurs. Vexthor leaned forward in his floating chair. Explain yourself, human. Chen walked to the center of the chamber. She moved slowly, her hands clasped behind her back. You say we've been secretly researching dark matter. You say we've built weapons and ships. You say we've violated your laws. She stopped and looked up at the assembled council members. You're right about all of that, but you're missing the most important part. And what might that be? Zethkri demanded. You assume this is still a secret, Chen said with a slight smile. Before anyone could respond, Chen pulled a small device from her pocket. It looked like nothing more than a simple communicator. She pressed a single button. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the space around the station began to shimmer like heat waves on a hot day. The shimmer grew stronger, and the stars outside seemed to bend and twist. The Vorth beings began making sharp, frightened sounds. The luminary dimmed to almost nothing. Even the confident Zethkri took a step backward. What have you done? Vexthor demanded. Chen looked up at the viewing screens that showed the space around the station. I've simply turned off our hiding devices. The screens flickered, and suddenly the empty space around the council station was empty no more. Ships appeared from nothing, as if they had been there all along but invisible to every sensor the aliens possessed. But these were not like any ships the galaxy had ever seen. They were massive, easily 3 times the size of the largest council vessels. Their hulls seemed to be made of liquid starlight, flowing and shifting in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Energy crackled along their surfaces in colors that had no names. There were dozens of them. They hung in space like sleeping giants, their mere presence making the Council's mighty station look small and fragile. "Impossible," whispered one of the Krek's representatives. "Our sensors show nothing." "Your sensors are designed to detect normal matter," Chen explained. "These ships exist partially in dark matter space. To your instruments, they're barely there at all." The chamber erupted in chaos. Aliens of all species began shouting, demanding explanations, calling for their fleets. Council leader Vexthor slammed his staff against the floor, creating a sound like thunder. "Silence," he roared. "How long have these ships been here?" Chen checked a display on her communicator. "About 6 hours. They've been watching and listening to everything you've said today." The truth hit the Council like a physical blow. While they had been sitting in judgment of humanity, human warships had been surrounding them, invisible and undetected. The most advanced species in the galaxy had been completely blind to their presence. "This is an act of war." Zethkri snarled, his scales now bright red with fury. "No," Chen said quietly. "This is a graduation ceremony." She touched her communicator again. "Captain Torres, please introduce yourself to our hosts." A new voice filled the chamber, calm and professional. "Council members, this is Captain Marcus Torres of the Earth vessel Prometheus Unbound. My crew and I have been honored to observe today's proceedings." On the main screen, an image appeared of a human man in his 40s. He sat in what was clearly a ship's bridge, but like the ships themselves, it didn't look like anything the Council had seen before. The walls seemed to pulse with inner light, and strange symbols floated in the air around him. "Impossible," Vexthor breathed. "No human technology could have hidden your ships from our sensors." Captain Torres smiled. "With respect, Council Leader, you're still thinking in terms of old technology. We stopped using normal matter for our ships years ago." The implications slowly sank in. Humanity hadn't just been researching dark matter. They had mastered it completely. They had built an entire fleet of ships that existed beyond the understanding of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. Admiral Chen looked up at the shocked faces around her. 300 years of being treated as primitive newcomers, of being restricted to the outer rim of the galaxy, of being told what they could and could not research. All of that was about to change. "Now then," she said calmly, "shall we discuss the real future of this galaxy?" The council chamber fell into stunned silence. Every alien representative stared at the viewing screens in disbelief. The human ships that had appeared from nothing continued to hang in space around the station, their liquid metal hulls flowing like water made of stars. Ambassador Zethkri was the first to recover. His scales shifted through several colors before settling on a deep orange that meant extreme anger among his people. "This is an outrage," he shouted. "You dare bring weapons into our sacred space?" Admiral Chen turned to face him, her expression unchanged. "These aren't weapons, Ambassador. They're just ships." "Ships?" Vexthor's ancient voice cracked with disbelief. "No ship in the galaxy can hide from our sensors. We have technology that can detect a grain of sand in the next star system." Captain Torres's voice came through the speakers again, still calm and friendly. "That's true, Council Leader. Your sensors are remarkable. They can detect anything made of normal matter." On the main screen, the view switched to show the inside of Torres's ship. The bridge was unlike anything the Council had ever seen. Crew members sat at stations that seemed to float in the air. Holographic displays showed information in 3 dimensions, and the walls themselves pulsed with patterns of light that suggested the ship was somehow alive. "But we discovered something interesting about dark matter," Torres continued. "It doesn't just make up most of the universe. It exists in its own space, separate from what you call reality." A Vorth representative, her crystal body clicking with nervous energy, spoke up. "Dark matter research is forbidden. The Astral Accords clearly state—" "The Astral Accords were written by species who never learned to think beyond their limitations," Chen interrupted. "Humanity chose a different path." She activated another control on her device. The image on the screen changed to show technical diagrams that made no sense to the watching aliens. Lines of force curved through dimensions that shouldn't exist. Energy patterns flowed in impossible directions. "While you spent thousands of years perfecting old technologies," Chen explained, "we kept asking questions. What if space has more dimensions than we can see? What if matter and energy can exist in states we haven't discovered? What if the rules you think are absolute are just suggestions?" The luminary representative flickered bright white with what might have been fear. "But the Jektai tried this path 5,000 years ago. They destroyed their entire home system. The Jektai tried to force dark matter to behave like normal matter, Torres said from the screen. We learned to work with it instead, to become part of it. As if to demonstrate his point, Torres stood up from his chair and walked toward what looked like a solid wall. Instead of stopping, he passed right through it like it was made of air. A moment later, he emerged from a different wall on the other side of the bridge. The effect on the council was immediate. Several species began making distress calls in their own languages. The Krek started buzzing with what sounded like panic. Even the ancient Archon seemed shaken. How is this possible? Vexthor demanded. We learned to exist in multiple states at once, Chen said simply. Our ships, our crew, even our consciousness can shift between normal matter and dark matter space. We're here, but we're also not here. We exist in your reality, but we can step outside it whenever we choose. To prove her point, Chen began to fade. Her outline became fuzzy, like looking at someone through water. For a moment, the council could see right through her to the wall behind. Then she became solid again. This is impossible, Zethkri whispered. Matter cannot behave this way. Normal matter can't, Chen agreed. But once you understand that normal matter is just one small part of reality, everything changes. The main screen switched to show the outside of the human ships again. As the council watched, one of the vessels began to change shape. Its hull flowed like liquid, stretching and reshaping itself from a sleek warship into something that looked more like a living creature. Energy patterns danced along its surface in colors that hurt to look at. Our ships don't just use dark matter, Torres explained. They are dark matter, held in stable patterns by our will and technology. They can be anything we need them to be. Captain Torres touched a control on his floating console. Computer showed them the Aurora formation. Suddenly, all the human ships began to move. But they didn't fly through space like normal vessels. Instead, they seemed to flow, their forms becoming streams of light that danced between the stars. The patterns they made were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. We call this the Aurora formation, Torres said as his ships continued their impossible dance. It lets us exist in multiple locations at once while sharing consciousness across the entire fleet. The implications hit the council like a physical blow. These weren't just advanced ships. They were something completely new, something that broke every rule of physics and technology that the galaxy understood. How many ships do you have? Vexthor asked quietly. Chen smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. That's the wrong question, Council Leader. When your ships can exist in multiple dimensions and reshape themselves at will, numbers become meaningless. Then what is the right question? The ancient Archon asked. The right question, Chen said, is whether you're ready to learn. Ambassador Zethkri's scales had turned black, which among his people meant complete shock. Learn what? How to step beyond the boundaries you've set for yourselves, Chen replied. For 3,000 years, the Council has controlled the galaxy by deciding what research is allowed and what is forbidden. You've kept every species trapped in the same old patterns of thinking. She gestured toward the screen showing the human ships, which had now formed a complex geometric pattern around the station. But humanity never accepted that anything was impossible. We kept pushing, kept questioning, kept looking for new answers. And now? Vexthor asked. Now we're ready to share what we've learned, Chen said. But not under the Council's old rules. Not as junior members begging for permission to exist. As partners. As teachers, the chamber erupted again. Some aliens demanded immediate action against the human threat. Others called for their military fleets to be summoned. A few, however, began asking different questions. What exactly are you proposing? Asked a Luminari representative, her energy form pulsing with curiosity. Chen looked around the chamber at all the different species represented there. Each one had once been innovative and curious before the Council's rules had trained them to think inside safe boundaries. We're proposing a new age, she said, one where the only limitation is imagination. Captain Torres's voice added from the speakers. We're offering to teach any species that wants to learn. Not just about dark matter technology, but about thinking beyond what you've been told is possible. And if we refuse? Zethkri asked, his voice tight with anger. Chen's smile faded slightly. Then you'll continue exactly as you have been. Safe, predictable, and limited. While humanity explores realities you can't even imagine. The threat was clear, though Chen hadn't spoken it directly. The Council could choose to learn and grow. Or they could be left behind by a species that had already moved beyond their understanding. Vexthor leaned back in his floating chair, his ancient mind processing everything he had seen and heard. "Show us more," he said finally. Chen nodded to her communicator. "Captain Torres, I think it's time for a full demonstration." "Understood, Admiral." Preparing for Phase 2. The human ships began to glow brighter, their hulls crackling with barely contained energy. Whatever they were about to show the Council, it was clear that the real revelation was just beginning. The tension in the Council chamber was thick enough to cut. Every alien representative watched the screens as the human ships prepared for what Admiral Chen had called a full demonstration. The vessels glowed brighter now, energy crackling across their liquid metal hulls in patterns that seemed almost alive. Ambassador Zethkri couldn't contain himself any longer. His scales had shifted to bright red, signaling maximum aggression among his people. "Enough of this theater," he shouted. "Council security, activate all defense platforms immediately." Admiral Chen didn't seem concerned by the threat. She simply looked up at Zethkri with the same calm expression she'd worn all day. "Are you sure about that, Ambassador?" Before anyone could answer, the space around the Council station began to fill with new contacts. Massive defense platforms emerged from hidden positions throughout the system. Each one was the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. These were the Council's ultimate protection, hidden guardians that had kept the peace for centuries. "You see, human?" Zethkri's voice was filled with triumph. "Your little demonstration ends now. Surrender your ships or face the consequences." The defense platforms began powering up their weapons. Energy readings spiked across every sensor as cannons that could crack planets prepared to fire. The sight should have terrified any sane captain into immediate surrender. Captain Torres's voice came through the speakers, still calm and almost amused. "Admiral, they're charging weapons." "I can see that, Captain," Chen replied. "How long until they're ready to fire?" "Approximately 43 seconds at current charge rates." Chen nodded and turned back to face the Council. "You have 43 seconds to reconsider. After that, I'm afraid you'll need to build new defense platforms." Zethkri laughed, a harsh sound like grinding metal. "Your arrogance is astounding. Do you know what those platforms can do? Each one carries enough firepower to sterilize a continent." "I'm sure they're very impressive," Chen said politely. "Captain Torres, please show the Council why we're not concerned." "Of course, Admiral." Initiating selective reality displacement. On the main screen, the view focused on the nearest defense platform. It was a massive structure, over 50 kilometers long and covered in weapon arrays that glowed with deadly energy. It represented thousands of years of Council engineering and enough destructive power to end civilizations. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the platform began to shimmer. Just like the space around the human ships had done earlier, the shimmer grew stronger, and the massive structure started to look less solid, as if it was becoming a ghost of itself. "What's happening?" Vexthor demanded, his ancient voice filled with alarm. Captain Torres answered calmly. "We're moving it into dark matter space. The platform still exists, but not in a way that can affect normal matter anymore." The Council members watched in horror as their ultimate weapons slowly faded from view. The energy readings dropped to 0. The massive guns that had been charging to fire simply stopped existing in any meaningful way. "Impossible," whispered a Vorth representative, her crystal body singing with distress. "You can't just move matter between dimensions." "Actually, we can," Torres replied. "Dark matter and normal matter are just different states of the same thing. Once you understand how to shift between them, moving objects becomes quite simple." To demonstrate, the platform suddenly reappeared, solid and real again. Then it vanished once more, only to return in a slightly different position. The human ships were playing with a structure the size of a small moon like it was a toy. Zethkri's scales had gone completely white, which among his people indicated total shock. But the energy requirements, the power needed to move something that large, would be enormous if you were fighting the laws of physics, Chen agreed. "But we're not fighting them. We're working with laws you haven't discovered yet." She activated her communicator again. "Captain Torres, please show them the difference between fighting reality and working with it." "Understood." Switching to combat formation, the human ships suddenly spread out, taking positions around the entire defense grid. There were dozens of Council platforms, each one a fortress in space. But the human vessels moved with impossible grace, flowing through space like living things rather than machines. Council Defense Command, this is Admiral Chen, she announced. You have 30 seconds to power down all weapon systems. Never. Zethikri shouted. Fire all platforms. Destroy these invaders. The remaining defense platforms opened fire. Beams of energy that could melt asteroids lanced out toward the human ships. Missiles that could crack moons streaked through space. The combined firepower was enough to destroy everything within a light-year radius. None of it hit anything. The human ships didn't dodge or use shields. They simply stepped sideways into dark matter space, letting the attacks pass harmlessly through the areas where they had been. The energy beams and missiles continued on their paths, striking nothing but empty space. Incredible, breathed a Luminari representative. They're not even fighting back. Why would we? Torres asked from the screen. Violence is what you do when you can't think of a better solution. To prove his point, one of the human ships flowed toward the largest defense platform. Instead of attacking it, the vessel simply merged with the massive structure. The platform's hull began to change, rippling like water as the human ship passed through it. When the ship emerged on the other side, the platform was completely different. Its weapons were gone, replaced by gardens that shouldn't be able to exist in space. The armored hull had become transparent, showing complex ecosystems inside where there had once been ammunition storage. What did you do? Fexcree demanded. We improved it, Torres said simply. That platform can now support life instead of ending it. The beings living there will have perfect environments and unlimited resources. The transformation was impossible by any known science. Matter couldn't be reorganized on that scale, especially not in the vacuum of space. But the humans had done it anyway, turning a weapon of war into a garden of peace in seconds. This is beyond technology, Bexthor said quietly. This is something else entirely. Admiral Chen nodded. Now you're beginning to understand. We haven't just learned to manipulate dark matter. We've learned to think with it. She gestured toward the screens showing the human ships. Our consciousness exists in both normal and dark matter space. We can see possibilities that don't exist yet and make them real. We can imagine solutions that seem impossible and then create them. Another platform fired at the human ships, and again the attack passed harmlessly through them. This time, the human vessel that had been targeted flowed back toward the platform, but instead of transforming it, something different happened. The platform's crew began reporting over communication channels that their weapons were shutting down on their own. Not broken or destroyed, but simply refusing to function. The ship's computer systems were rewriting themselves, removing all capacity for violence while enhancing everything else. We're not conquering your defenses, Torres explained. We're convincing them that there are better ways to exist. Within minutes, every defense platform in the system had been transformed. Some became research stations, others turned into habitats for displaced populations, and a few became art installations that painted light across space in beautiful patterns. The Council's ultimate weapons had become symbols of creation instead of destruction, and the transformation had been accomplished without harming a single alien life. How? Zethkri whispered, his voice broken with shock. Chen smiled sadly. Because we never forgot the most important human trait. We never stopped believing that everything could be better. She looked around the chamber at the stunned faces of the galaxy's most powerful beings. This is what you could all become. This is what we're offering to teach you. And if we refuse to learn? Vexthor asked. Chen's expression grew serious. Then you'll spend the rest of your existence wondering what you could have been. The demonstration was over, but the real choice was just beginning. The council chamber was eerily quiet after the transformation of their defense platforms. Every alien representative stared at the screens showing gardens where weapons used to be, research stations where fortresses once stood. The impossible had become reality in a matter of minutes. Ambassador Zethkri stood frozen at his position, his scales cycling through colors so rapidly that they hurt to look at. His people's color language couldn't find a single hue to express what he was feeling. 3,000 years of military superiority had been gently set aside like a child's toy. This isn't possible, he whispered for the 10th time. Physics doesn't work this way. Admiral Chen walked closer to the center of the chamber, her footsteps echoing in the silence. Physics works exactly this way, Ambassador. You've just been looking at a very small piece of it. She gestured to Captain Torres's image on the main screen. Captain, I think it's time for the real lesson to begin. Torres nodded and touched a control on his floating console. Initiating consciousness bridge. All human vessels prepare for full demonstration protocols. Suddenly, the air in the chamber began to shimmer, not just on the screens, but in the actual space around the council members. Reality itself seemed to become flexible, like looking through water that wasn't quite there. "What's happening?" demanded a Krex representative, their hive mind voice showing rare individual panic. "We're showing you how we really see the universe," Chen explained. "But don't worry, this won't hurt." The shimmer grew stronger, and suddenly the council members could see things that shouldn't exist. Energy patterns flowed through the air like rivers of light. The walls of the chamber showed layers upon layers of structure that went deeper than matter itself. Space around them revealed dimensions that folded in on themselves in impossible ways. A Vorth representative made a sound like crystal bells as her perception expanded. "I can see. There are structures in space that we never detected, whole frameworks of reality we never knew existed." "Dark matter isn't empty space," Torres explained from the screen. "It's a complete parallel reality that exists alongside ours. Most species only ever learn to see one layer of existence. We learned to see them all." The view changed again, and now the council members could perceive the human ships as they truly were. They weren't just vessels sailing through space. They were conscious entities that existed in multiple dimensions at once, thinking with the very fabric of reality itself. "Your ships are alive," breathed a luminary representative, her energy form flickering with amazement. "In a way," Chen agreed. "We learned to merge biological consciousness with dark matter structures. Our ships think and feel and dream just like we do. They're not tools we use. They're partners we work with." To demonstrate, one of the human vessels flowed closer to the station. As it approached, the council members could hear something impossible. The ship was singing. Not with sounds, but with harmonies that existed in dark matter space. Melodies made of twisted reality itself. "This is how we navigate," Torres explained. "We don't calculate courses through space. We sing ourselves to where we want to be." Vexthor, ancient even by Archon standards, leaned forward in his floating chair. "Show us how you learned this. Show us the process." Chen activated her communicator again, and new images appeared on the screens. These showed human research facilities, but not the secret weapons labs the council had expected. Instead, they saw something much more profound. "We didn't start by trying to build weapons," Chen explained. "We started by trying to understand consciousness itself. What makes a mind? How do thoughts become real? Can awareness exist without a physical brain?" The images showed human scientists working with volunteers who had terminal illnesses. Instead of letting them die, the humans had learned to transfer their consciousness into dark matter patterns, preserving their minds in structures that could last forever. "We discovered that consciousness is just another form of energy," Torres said, "and energy can be moved, shaped, and expanded beyond biological limits." A Krex representative buzzed with their hive mind frequency. "But consciousness requires biological neural networks. This is scientifically impossible." "Only if you limit yourself to biological thinking," Chen replied. "We learn to think with dark matter itself. Imagine having a brain the size of a solar system, with thoughts that travel faster than light." To prove the point, Torres stood up from his chair and began to change. His human form became translucent, and the council could see energy patterns flowing through him where blood vessels should be. His consciousness wasn't contained in his skull. It extended throughout the ship and beyond. "I'm not just Captain Torres anymore," he said, his voice now coming from multiple sources throughout the chamber. "I'm Torres and my ship and my crew and the dark matter between the stars. We're all connected in ways that biology never allowed." The implications hit the council like a tsunami. These humans hadn't just developed new technology. They had evolved beyond the need for individual biological existence while somehow remaining recognizably human. "How many of you are there?" Vexthor asked quietly. Chen smiled. "All of us. Every human who chose to make the transition. We exist as individuals, but we're also part of something larger, a collective consciousness that spans the galaxy. But you still seem human," observed a luminary representative. "Because we chose to remain human," Torres replied, his form becoming solid again. "We could have become something completely alien, but we decided that our humanity was worth preserving. We just expanded it." The chamber fell silent as the alien representatives tried to process what they were seeing. These humans had achieved something that every advanced species had dreamed of: transcendence beyond biological limits, while somehow keeping their essential nature intact. What do you want from us? Zethkri finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. We want to share this gift, Chen said simply. Every species in this chamber has the potential to make the same transition. You could all expand beyond your current limitations. But at what cost? Demanded an Archon representative. What do we lose in the process? Torres answered by showing them images from human colonies throughout the galaxy. They saw Vorth beings whose crystal bodies now existed in both dimensions, their thoughts enhanced by dark matter networks, luminary entities whose energy forms had expanded to encompass entire star systems, even some Kreks who had learned to share their hive mind across galactic distances. You lose nothing, Torres explained. You gain everything. Enhanced consciousness, expanded awareness, the ability to exist in multiple realities at once. And the price? Vexthor pressed. Chen's expression grew serious. The price is giving up the illusion that you're separate from the universe around you. The price is accepting that everything you thought you knew about reality was just the beginning. She looked around the chamber at the various species represented there. The price is change. Real change, not just technological advancement. Some of our people won't want this, admitted a Vorth representative. Then they don't have to choose it, Chen replied. We're not forcing evolution on anyone. But we're also not going to let fear of change hold back those who are ready to grow. Captain Torres added, We've learned that consciousness wants to expand. It's the natural direction of all intelligent life. We're just offering to show you the path we've discovered. The council members began talking among themselves in their various languages. Some seemed excited by the possibilities, others frightened by the implications. A few appeared to be calculating political advantages and disadvantages. Admiral Chen watched them debate and remembered when humanity had faced the same choice decades ago. The fear, the uncertainty, the desperate hope that they could become something better than what they were. Take your time to decide, she said, her voice carrying over the alien discussions. But remember, we're not the only ones who've learned these lessons. There are other species out there, ones that haven't chosen to share their knowledge as freely as we do. The implied threat was gentle but clear. Humanity was offering partnership and growth. But if the Council refused, they might find themselves facing other transcended species who weren't so generous with their gifts. The education had begun, but the real test was whether these ancient civilizations could overcome their fear of change long enough to accept the future that was being offered to them. The debate in the council chamber had raged for 3 hours. Representatives from 12 species argued, questioned, and demanded explanations for what they had witnessed. Some called for immediate acceptance of humanity's offer. Others insisted it was too dangerous to consider. A few simply sat in stunned silence, trying to process the magnitude of what they had learned. Admiral Chen waited patiently through it all. She had expected this reaction. When humanity first discovered the principles of dark matter consciousness, their own people had debated for months before the first volunteers agreed to make the transition. Finally, Council Leader Vexthor raised his staff for silence. The ancient Archon looked every one of his 3,000 years as he studied the humans on the screen and in the chamber. We have heard your offer, he said slowly. We have seen your demonstrations. But before we can consider such a momentous decision, we need to understand the full implications. Chen nodded. What would you like to know? Show us your colonies, demanded a Krex representative. Show us what becomes of a species that chooses this path. Captain Torres smiled and touched his control console. Very well. Computer, connect us to New Geneva Colony. The main screen flickered and showed a star system that looked like something from a dream. 3 planets orbited a yellow sun, but these worlds had been transformed beyond recognition. Cities of light stretched between the planets, connected by streams of energy that pulsed with life. The space between worlds wasn't empty. It was filled with gardens that existed in dark matter space, ecosystems that thrived in the vacuum. New Geneva was our first colony to achieve full transcendence, Torres explained. The colonists chose to expand their consciousness beyond individual bodies while maintaining their essential humanity. The view zoomed in to show one of the cities. Buildings flowed like liquid crystal, reshaping themselves according to the needs of their inhabitants. People moved through the streets, but they weren't quite human anymore. They were taller, more graceful, and their bodies seemed to shimmer between solid matter and pure energy. They looked different, observed a Vorth representative. They chose to optimize their physical forms, Chen explained. Enhanced strength, expanded sensory capabilities, immunity to disease and aging, but they're still recognizably human in their thoughts and emotions. A figure on the screen noticed the transmission and approached. She appeared to be a human woman, but her eyes held depths that suggested vast intelligence, and her movements had a fluid grace that seemed to defy gravity. "Admiral Chen," the woman said, her voice carrying harmonics that shouldn't be possible from a human throat. "I'm Dr. Sarah Kim, current coordinator of New Geneva. We're honored to speak with the Council." Ambassador Zethkri leaned forward, his scales now a cautious yellow. "Dr. Kim, what was the cost of your transformation? What did you lose?" Dr. Kim smiled, and her expression was unmistakably human despite her enhanced nature. "We lost our limitations, Ambassador. We lost the fear of death, the burden of disease, the barriers that separated us from each other and from the universe itself. But surely there were negative consequences," pressed a Luminari representative. "The only negative consequence was that some of our people chose not to undergo the transformation," Dr. Kim replied. "They remained on Earth as baseline humans, and we respect their choice. But for those of us who chose to evolve, every day brings new wonders." The view switched to show the transformed humans at work. They were building structures that existed in multiple dimensions, creating art from pure energy, and conducting research that pushed the boundaries of reality itself. Children played games that involved reshaping local space-time, laughing as they created temporary pocket universes for their entertainment. "The children," whispered Vexthor, "they're manipulating reality as if it were clay. Because to them it is," Torres explained. "When you understand that consciousness shapes reality, manipulating matter and energy becomes as natural as thinking." Dr. Kim added, "Our children are born with awareness that spans multiple dimensions. They see possibilities we could never imagine, even in our enhanced state." The implications were staggering. These weren't just technologically advanced humans. They were a new form of life entirely, one that treated the laws of physics as suggestions rather than absolute rules. "What about the other species who chose transformation?" asked a Krex representative. The screen split to show other colonies throughout human space. There were Vorth cities where crystal beings had learned to exist as living networks of thought, spanning entire continents. Luminary communities had merged their energy forms with stellar phenomena, becoming conscious suns that nurtured life on their planets. Even more remarkable were the mixed colonies where multiple species had undergone transformation together. Humans, Vorth, Luminary, and others worked side by side, their expanded consciousnesses allowing them to truly understand each other for the first time. "We call this the Transcendence Project," Chen explained. "It's not about creating a single unified species. It's about helping each race become the best possible version of itself, while learning to work together in ways that were never possible before." The chamber fell silent as the council absorbed what they were seeing. These transformed beings had solved problems that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. Resource conflicts were meaningless when matter could be created at will. Territorial disputes became irrelevant when consciousness could exist across multiple star systems. Even death had lost its sting when minds could be preserved in dark matter structures that would outlast the stars themselves. "How do we know this isn't some form of control?" Zethkri asked suspiciously. "How do we know you haven't simply created a way to dominate us?" Dr. Kim laughed, and the sound carried joy that seemed to resonate through dimensions. "Ambassador, when you can reshape reality with a thought, the concept of domination becomes meaningless. Why would we want to control others when we can simply create whatever we need?" Torres added, "Besides, consciousness that has been expanded in this way naturally tends toward cooperation and growth. The petty conflicts that drive baseline civilization simply become irrelevant." Council leader Vexthor had been quietly considering everything he had seen and heard. Finally, the ancient Archon spoke. "What exactly are you proposing for the Council?" Admiral Chen straightened, knowing this was the crucial moment. "We propose a new structure for galactic governance. Not the old system of control and restrictions, but a partnership between species that are ready to grow beyond their current limitations." "And those who choose not to transform?" asked a Vorth representative. "They remain exactly as they are," Chen assured her. "We have no interest in forcing evolution on unwilling participants, but we also won't allow fear of change to hold back those who are ready to transcend." Captain Torres brought up a new display showing the proposed governmental structure. The new council would include both transformed and baseline representatives. Decisions would be made through consciousness sharing when possible, allowing for deeper understanding than words alone can provide. What about the astral accords? Demanded Zethkri. The laws that have kept peace in this galaxy for thousands of years? Would be replaced by something better, Chen replied. Laws based on understanding and cooperation rather than fear and restriction. When beings can share consciousness directly, deception becomes impossible and conflicts resolve themselves naturally. The offer hung in the air like a bridge between two worlds. On one side lay the familiar but limited existence the Council had always known. On the other was a future of infinite possibility, but also infinite uncertainty. One by one, the Council members began to respond. The Luminari were the first to express interest, their energy forms naturally suited to consciousness expansion. Several Vorth representatives followed, intrigued by the possibility of enhancing their crystalline matrix thinking. Even some of the more conservative species began asking detailed questions about the transformation process. Ambassador Zethkri held out the longest, his scales cycling through colors of doubt and suspicion. But eventually, even he had to admit that humanity had proven their intentions through their actions. You could have simply conquered us, he said finally. Your power is overwhelming. But instead you offer partnership. Chen nodded. Because conquest achieves nothing permanent. Partners, on the other hand, can build something that lasts forever. The vote, when it came, wasn't unanimous. 3 species chose to remain in their baseline forms, at least for now, but 9 others voted to begin the transformation process, starting with volunteer individuals who would serve as bridges between the old and new ways of existence. As the council session ended, Admiral Chen looked out at the human ships still surrounding the station. They were no longer weapons of war or symbols of dominance. They were teachers, ready to help any species that chose to expand beyond its current limitations. Captain Torres, she said into her communicator, begin Phase 3 protocols. It's time to start building the future. Understood, Admiral, came the reply. All vessels are prepared to begin consciousness bridging with volunteer participants. The Galactic Council hadn't been destroyed or conquered. It had been transformed, just like everything else humanity touched.